Welcome to a play-by-play review. I'm your host Henry, and week 8. It was it was interesting to say the least. Um, Not my favorite week as a fan of the Washington Commanders, but for some other teams, it was certainly well. For the Ravens, especially, this was about as much of a dream scenario as it could be. But we'll get to them later. This week, besides being interesting in the game's perspective, this was also it's pretty special week in terms of unique things. It was both Sunday was tight end or National Tight End Day, and it was also the week of Byemageddon. So for those who aren't in the know about that, National Tight End Day is not fan made. It's a holiday, quote unquote, that was kind of created by George Kittle, the superstar tight end of the San Francisco 49ers. He kind of sort of started as a joke where he just kind of said it over and over again to a bunch of his teammates one day. And it sort of became this whole thing where in week 8, it's quote unquote National Tight End Day. So it's, spotlight the tight ends. And they actually seem to do pretty well. Tucker Kraft for the Green Bay Packers this year had well, we'll get to him. He had quite the game. And then Byemageddon is that there are 6 teams on the bye this week. The Lions, the Raiders, the Cardinals, the Rams, the Jaguars, I should say, and the Seahawks were all had byes this week. So there were not a ton of games going on this time around, which should, in theory, make this episode be a little bit shorter, but who knows? This week also featured almost exclusively blowouts or just not very close games. There was in the Sunday slate alone, like your red zone slate. There was one game that was one possession, and even then the primetime games were, while some of them were close for a half, it was by the end of it they were very one sided. And the Thursday night game was a complete romp. We'll get to that in a second. And this week also was, well, a lot more terrible refereeing, which just seems to be the theme this season of the ref ball being some of the worst we've seen in a good long while. And it also felt like a lot of the sort of feel goody stories of the season were starting to crash and burn a little bit, whether through just injuries or underperformance. We'll get to the Giants in a second. A very, very unfortunate injury there, but that will be coming up soon. So we start with Thursday Night Football. The Minnesota Vikings going into LA to take on the Chargers, not the Rams. Chargers were 4-3, going on a bit of a skid, while the Vikings were 3-3. They had a bye. Chargers have not had a bye yet. And I mean, the Vikings they've been kind of up and down, but they'd been dealing with plenty of injuries of their own. Both teams dealing with major injuries on the offensive line, as we kind of know throughout this whole season. Like, nothing new there. This is another Carson Wentz start for the Vikings, although the Chargers also did get Joe Alt back on the offensive line, so that was very big for them, and it really showed. The Chargers won this game 37-10 in a game that was just never close in the slightest. The Chargers wore their really nice throwback, like dark blue uniforms that that they wore in like the early to mid 2000s, like the LaDainian Tomlinson years. Those Chargers uniforms, and they look really good in this one. And it clearly helped them. Well, I say clearly helped them. That was jokingly clearly helped them. But the Chargers just completely outplay the Vikings on both sides of the ball. Oronde Gadsden, the second, I think, or at least he is not the only Oronde Gadsden who has played in the NFL. His father played in the NFL, 20-ish years ago, I think, for the Dolphins, at tight end. This Oronde Gadsden, he plays for tight end, or he is a tight end for the Chargers, a rookie tight end, and he only really made an impact in one half, but he had like 5 catches for 77 yards and 2 touchdowns. And he was making some insane grabs as well. Like, this was it. The first half was the Oronde Gadsden show, and it was a sort of prelude for National Tight End Day, you could say. And it was just kind of a microcosm of this game where the Chargers, their offensive attack, especially the passing attack, was very efficient. The run game was also very efficient. Kamani Vidal, who is the Chargers' third string running back, with both Najee Harris, well, him down for the season, and then Omarion Hampton on injured reserve, though only for 4 to 6 weeks from what we can tell. Vidal has stepped up now in the starting running back role, at least in this game. He went for 117 yards and a touchdown. And it was really just one where, outside of Quentin Johnson, who had a solid 0 catches, it was one where the Chargers were just completely dominating the Vikings defensively, or dominating the Vikings defense. On the flip side of the ball, Wentz did not have the best game, and it was also it's come out since that he's been playing with a torn labrum, and I think like another shoulder injury as well for the past 2.5 games. And it was very easy to tell over the course of this game that his injuries were just getting worse and worse with each passing drive. And like he was wincing so hard on like after every play in the second half. It was rough to see. And it was really surprising to see the Vikings not pull Carson Wentz sooner. Like he got pulled towards the end of the game by the time it was like just completely out of reach, but like he probably should have been pulled after halftime, even just for his health. Not to mention that he was not performing great, but I mean, when your shoulder, it wasn't his throwing shoulder, but still a shoulder, is like probably just completely shredded, and he's going to have season-ending surgery to repair it. It's not, you don't want to have that guy in because it's just going to make things worse and worse. So I feel really bad for Carson Wentz, and because his career might be over at this point with an injury that seems that severe. And I mean, even like he's been a backup for, the past 5-ish years, essentially, really after he got cut from Philly after 2020. And, he's been in the league for 10 years at this point, and he's going to be coming off a major surgery. So I don't know. I mean, a team might take a flyer on him, but I don't know what kind of status he's going to be in by the time he gets, healthy again. Because this is week 8, and he's going in for a major shoulder surgery. Not quite sure if we're going to see Carson Wentz playing again in the NFL. I don't wish this to be the end of his career. I think it would be kind of neat to see him come back, at least for like, even for a backup role, just see him, not have this be the way he goes out, essentially. But it sucks for Carson Wentz, and I hope he gets better. And really, just as for the Vikings as a whole, this was a really bad loss. Their defense was, it's been a strong suit of theirs, or at least has been on brand, like brand wise, a strong suit for them for what feels like forever. But this season especially has, outside of the Bengals game where they're playing Jake Browning, it was not good at all. And I'm not quite sure what the Vikings need to do to fix it. I mean, I don't know if they have to like change coordinators or like invest heavily in the defense in the upcoming draft. We'll see. Obviously they're 3-4, and partly because JJ McCarthy has only played in like 1.5 games so far this year, which is not helpful. So it's not like they've just been bad, just flat out bad. Like they've been dealing with a ton of injuries. But it's one where you really got to hope McCarthy comes back, or else this season's going to be a wash. So moving on to Sunday, since we don't, I say the Sunday afternoon games, since we don't have international games at the moment. We'll start with the 1:00 games. The New York Jets going into Cincinnati to take on the Bengals. The Jets were winless heading into this game, and the Bengals were coming off that Thursday night game against the Steelers where they kind of shocked the world, almost with Joe Flacco leading them to victory over the Steelers that Thursday night. And this is another Joe Flacco start, and well, the Cincinnati offense showed up. They scored 38 points. Who did not show up, however, was the Cincinnati defense. Trey Hendrickson, who was back in this game after injury, got injured again, and by this when the second half rolled around, the Cincinnati defense really felt it in the sense that they just forgot to show up in the second half. The New York Jets won this game 39-38. Even after being down by 14 points with 8 minutes left to go in the third quarter, they scored 2 touchdowns, kicked an extra point for one, converted a 2-point conversion for the other on a Breece Hall pass, I might add. I was very critical of Breece Hall earlier in the season. He had a really good game, 18 carries for 133 yards and 2 touchdowns just on the ground. And then on the 2-point conversion play that would wind up winning it, he got like a halfback toss essentially and ran sideways towards the sideline. And then just kind of like, it wasn't even like a normal QB throw. It was almost like a sideways huck, or like he just kind of chucked it over to his tight end who just kind of mossed the defender for the 2 points. It was a very odd play. One that I don't think you'll ever going to see again, just like with how like that kind of pass. It was just really odd. You don't see that played very often, if ever. But it worked in this case. And so the Jets and Aaron Glenn get their first win of the season. Aaron Glenn getting his first win as a head coach. And this was one where going into it, there was a lot of drama surrounding the Jets as per usual. So Justin Fields, who had gotten benched during the course of the game last week, was scheduled to remain on the bench with Tyrod Taylor starting. Unfortunately for Tyrod Taylor, he got injured over the course of the week before the game started. I don't remember like how it happened, but I just know he was declared out with an injury before the game started. So Justin Fields was thrust back into the starting role. And a little bit of the drama was that the owners had their annual midseason meeting. And during the meeting, Woody Johnson, the owner of the New York Jets, who has been in the spotlight a lot the past couple of years for just saying the dumbest things possible, continued that trend by basically saying that Justin Fields was terrible and that the Jets are losing games because he cannot throw the ball. And while he's not entirely been, or like that statement isn't entirely wrong, like Fields has not been playing well, besides this week, I should say. He had not been playing well whatsoever outside of the Steelers game in week 1. It's not something the owner of a team should really be saying. Cause it just throwing a player that like you signed to a pretty big contract, in the offseason, just completely under the bus. When ultimately this team's performance does start and end with the ownership, especially for someone who does seem to meddle as much as Woody Johnson does, it was not a good look. So Justin Fields I would assume, was probably a little bit motivated by that, and he put on probably his best performance of the season. Again, it's the Bengals defense, and they're one of the worst in the league, so it's not like world shattering or anything like that, but it's still really nice to see for Jets fans. One thing also to note, and I meant to do this at the top of the episode, but I'll do this now because it is in related to the Jets. So the longtime center for the Jets, Nick Mangold, who played back, I believe, in the 2000s, sadly passed away right like the day before this game happened. He was only 41. He had kidney failure, I believe, and couldn't find a compatible donor in time. Just really unfortunate situation all around. Mangold, who just seemed to be someone who always got high praise from anyone who played with him, played against him, worked with him. Just everyone in the NFL sphere just completely sung his high praises all the time. So very, very tragic. And it does seem like a lot of times when teams when a player or a coach or someone, related closely to a team passes close to the date of a game, they usually, for whatever reason, usually play well. I'm not saying that's the reason they won, but it's always a nice feel good story when that happens. So rest in peace, Nick Mangold, and the Jets got you a win. This was one where the Jets scored 23 points in the fourth quarter. Their offense finally showed up to a game. Their defense, not so much. I mean, their defense actually did kind of clamp down in the second half. They only allowed 14 points total in the second half, which was nice. Um, Joe Flacco still looked pretty good for the Bengals. He again had the bright idea, and not in a sarcastic way, like the actual good idea of throwing it to Jamar Chase like 20 times a game. He also had a really nice deep ball to T. Higgins for a touchdown in this game. But ultimately, it was one where the Bengals' rushing attack was really struggling, and their defense without Trey Hendrickson is just non-existent. So it was just one where they completely fell flat in the second half and just choked it away. And any sort of optimism they had over the past couple weeks, where they were 3-4 heading in this game in a pretty weak AFC North. They just beaten Pittsburgh. Ravens were 1-5. The Browns are the Browns. So that there was still clearly a path for them to take to try and take the division. And I'm not saying it's over for them, but losing a game to the Jets, the winless Jets, at this point is really rough for them. Essentially, again, they're still 3-5. Pittsburgh's been on a skid. They do have to worry about Baltimore, but this is really bad for the Bengals. Essentially, it's going to be it's going to be hard for them to bounce back season wise after this. So moving on, speaking of the Ravens, going to move on to them next, since they were the next part in my notes. The Ravens played host to the Chicago Bears, who were coming off of I believe a 3 or 4 game win streak at this point. The Bears had been riding high. They beat the Commanders 2 weeks ago on Monday night in a game that the Commanders really should have won, but I kind of said my piece on that in my recap of that game. And the Bears also beat the Saints last week, so they were 4-2 heading into this game, and really riding high. Their run game especially had been really clicking, and going into this game where the Ravens had the Ravens were coming off a bye, but the Ravens had, up until this point, one of the worst defenses in the league, and this is also one where Lamar Jackson was not playing again. Instead, it was Tyler Huntley, who the Ravens finally decided to start instead of Cooper Rush. I don't think a lot of people were expecting a Bears loss in this one, but that is what happened. The Bears lost 16-30, and this was one where the Ravens took control of the game by the half and really never let up. One thing to say is that the Bears were missing a lot of players in the secondary. A lot of key players. I know Kyler Gordon, their superstar nickel cornerback, I believe he's on injured reserve. He was not playing in this game. I believe he's been placed on injured reserve. But this is one where I'm shocked at how poorly the Bears played in this game. Caleb Williams, he had 285 yards, which in a vacuum is good, but he had no touchdowns and one awful interception where the Bears were down, I believe, by 1 score at this point. It was in the second half, and they were just forced the Ravens to punt, and they were on their own 15-yard line, maybe even the 10. And Caleb Williams throws an interception that was just a very poor throw and set the Ravens up in prime field position to really blow the game open. Williams also missed a couple deep passes, then also one pass to I believe it was either DJ Moore or Roman Dunze. It might have actually been Roman Dunze in the end zone. That would have been a surefire touchdown. Rome was very wide open, and Caleb just completely missed him. And I'm not going to try and rag on Caleb Williams too much, because I do like him. I think he gets way too much hate. And he was just in his whole career, but I'm also going to be critical because he was not very good in this game. He put up a lot of you could say empty stats later on in garbage time, essentially. But when it mattered, he was not playing well. The Bears' rushing attack was stuffed the whole game. This is the best the Ravens defense has looked this whole season, by a good margin at that. This was more the Ravens team that we expected to see coming into the season, not the 1-5 team that we gotten so far. This was the best game I think the Ravens have played overall this season. Why the Ravens and John Harbaugh didn't have Tyler Huntley be their backup quarterback to begin with, I don't know, because it was clear that Cooper Rush could not run this type of offense, and it's already been proven that Tyler Huntley could. We saw it in 2023 and like other game, like many other times other than that. So I don't know why he wasn't starting to begin with, but in this game he did start and he played well enough. Like he didn't light up the stat sheet, but he led the Ravens to a win. He made the offense look decent, and with Lamar looking like he's going to be coming back for Week 9, the Ravens are 2-5, but they have a really easy schedule in terms of record wise. So it should be very interesting to see because they are 2-5, but they have an easy schedule and a really weak division at the moment. So there's a decent chance the Ravens actually get back into the playoffs here, even with the historically bad start that they've had. So next up, I'm going to take another sip of water here and then move on to the Dolphins and Falcons. And this is a game that was very, very unexpected. So the Falcons were going into Miami to take on the Dolphins, which I'm wrong. Actually, it was in Atlanta. I don't know. I read that the wrong way. But so the Falcons were playing host to the Dolphins, and the Dolphins, as I and many others have been chronicling this season, have been having a season from hell, to put it lightly. The Dolphins were 1-6 heading into this game. Falcons were 3-3, and this is a Falcons team that just 2 weeks ago beat the Bills on Monday night and beat them pretty handily. Like they were a team that completely stymied Josh Allen. And so this game, though, I will preface this by saying that Michael Penix Jr. and Drake London were out this game. So it was a Kirk Cousins start. First time we've seen Kirk Cousins this season, at least starting. I don't think he came in for a garbage time performance at any point this season, but he might have. I don't remember off the top of my head, but first time we've seen Kirk Cousins here for a full game. And he did not play well. The Falcons as a whole did not play well at all. Bijan Robinson had a pretty bad game. He had a really, really costly fumble that put the game out of reach. And the Miami Dolphins won this game 34-10. The Falcons only scored one touchdown in this game, and it was in complete garbage time by Tyler Algier. Fourth quarter, game was completely out of reach. Tua had an odd story in this game where he had an illness that caused his left eye to swell partially shut in this game. And yet he proceeded to go 20 of 26 for 205 yards and 4 touchdowns. So I don't really know what that means. I'm still extremely confused at the result of this game. The Falcons could do nothing this whole game on offense. This was the best game Miami has played in a long, long time. And this is one where both offensively and defensively, this is what Miami fans were hoping for when they came into the season. A good offense led by an efficient Tua, with a solid run game to back him up, and a good defense that, is, again, it's Kirk Cousins, and I think he's kind of done at this point. I think the Falcons are only really keeping him around because they paid him so much money in the 2024 offseason. And yeah, it was crazy. It was, I'm still so I could buy the Dolphins winning because the Falcons have been so streaky this year. They have some really good games and some really bad games. Obviously they got shut out by the Panthers in week 3 or 4. I forget when it was exactly, but they got shut out by the Panthers earlier this season. I didn't expect them to lose by 24 points to the Dolphins. And I just didn't expect it to be that bad, but it did happen. I don't know if this is something that the Dolphins are going to be able to build momentum off of, or if it's just going to be a flash in the pan against a streaky team starting a backup quarterback. But for a season that's been almost entirely low points, their only other win coming in against the Jets on a Monday night, and it's the Jets. You take what you can get, and sometimes it's it's pretty fun. Sometimes football can be pretty fun. So hey, good for the Dolphins. I don't think anyone's really thinking that they're going to go on a run and make the playoffs. I think the season's far too gone at this point for them. But I mean, there's at least, not every game is just something that, piles on the bad. Speaking of piling on the bad, though, at least for one of the teams in this game, the Bills going into Carolina to take on the Panthers. This was also a backup quarterback start. The Panthers were having to start Andy Dalton as Bryce Young had gotten injured in last week's game against the Jets and was not able to play in this game. I don't think it would have mattered because the Bills were coming off their bye, and they'd been a little streaky over the past couple weeks before that. So yeah, the Bills were clearly motivated. They didn't have Matt Milano in this game. Did not matter. The Bills won 40-9 in a game that was never close. James Cook had 19 carries for 216 yards and 2 touchdowns. Josh Allen didn't even really need to do much. This was just give James Cook the ball, let him just go absolutely ham on a Panthers defense that was really struggling. And yeah, the Panthers offense just couldn't really do anything either in this game. Andy Dalton had a pretty terrible game, all things considered. And yeah, it was just completely one-sided. This is one of the ones where I can only come up with so many ways to say, yeah, the Bills just completely kicked the Panthers' butt 9 ways to Sunday. And it was kind of the result when you're like looking at the schedule going into the season. It's kind of what the result you can predict and expect. It's it's the Bills who are, they're Super Bowl contenders, if not Super Bowl favorites for many, against I don't necessarily want to say rebuilding, but, somewhat rebuilding, clearly many steps away from a Super Bowl Carolina Panthers team starting a backup quarterback. And yeah, that 40-9 result is kind of what you get. I think the one silver lining for Carolina Panthers fans is that Tetterell McMillan does look really good. And they just need to get their run game going and get Bryce Young back and a lot of other things. But yeah, it was not good for them, to say the least. Another game that was not good for one of the teams, although this one was a lot more unexpected, or I wouldn't say a lot more, but definitely a little bit more unexpected, was the San Francisco 49ers going into Houston to take on the Texans. The Texans were, as I've chronicled, I don't need to use we because it's only me doing this. But the Texans have been having a really rough season so far, with injuries and a lot of major underperformances on the offensive side of the ball. And they're going up against a 49ers team that has definitely running away with the injury bowl this year, although some teams, even like the Washington Commanders, who I'm going to get to later, are definitely making a run for, who's had the worst amount of injuries. But I think the Niners are pretty comfortable in saying that they have the most amount of key injuries, with both on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. This is another Mac Jones start for the 49ers. And Kittle was back, but there's still no Ricky Pearsall. So it was clear they were trying to lean heavily on Christian McCaffrey. But the Texans defense played a really good game this time around. They completely stuffed Christian McCaffrey. And this is one where all the injuries that the Niners had on both sides of the ball was clearly catching up to them in this game, because offensively, once Christian McCaffrey started getting bottled up, they couldn't do much else. Mac Jones had a pretty rough game, and the receiving core was really struggling to get open. The Texans defense was playing them really well. And then on the other side of the ball, the Niners defense was just completely unable to stop the Texans offense, like on every level. This is one where the Texans had literally double the amount of time of possession as the 49ers. They actually had more. The Texans finished with around like 41 minutes of possession time compared to the 49ers, who had like 19 as a result. So it was one where like I'm watching it on Red Zone, and every time it flipped back to that game, the Texans had the ball. It was just the Niners on offense, they couldn't get much going, and then they just couldn't even get on the field. Stroud was 11 for 11 on third downs. The 49ers defense could not get off the field whatsoever. They just could do nothing this game. And it was why the Texans, I mean, 26-15 win. It probably could have been more than that. They were completely outclassing the Niners this whole game. Stroud goes 30 of 39 for 318 yards and 2 touchdowns. This was easily his best game of the season, in my opinion. Woody Marks started to get running a bit more. Their rookie running back that the Texans drafted. I hope to see them, get him more involved, partially because I have him on my fantasy team and I really need a running back to get going because I had James Conner and he obviously got injured early on in the season. So, I could use an RB2 next to Jonathan Taylor, who is, well, I'll get to him in a little bit. But yeah, it was nice to see the Texans offense finally live up to potential where they could actually protect CJ Stroud, actually get the run game going. And, it's when they can get that done, they're actually a pretty good offense. They have talent on a lot of side or a lot of spots on offense. It's just outside of their offensive line that has really struggled this year. They just have not been able to get it, consistently going in a game. This game finally showed what, the Texans offense really should be looking like. And so they're 3-4. I don't think they're going to win the division with how the Colts are playing, but if they can build off this and, their offensive line can play like they did this past week, I wouldn't count the Texans out because, as much as I've maligned on them, and I think plenty of others have maligned on them this season for their underperformance, it's clear they have plenty of talent and, can start to, can really dominate games when they can get things, working correctly. And in this game against a really beleaguered 49ers team, it was clear that it was really working well on both sides of the ball. As for the 49ers, I do really worry that this is when the injuries start to catch up to them and that their really nice run of wins starts to fade away because they just don't have enough prime talent healthy to keep winning them games. So after that, we go to an NFC East divisional matchup. The Philadelphia Eagles hosting the New York Giants. The Giants had won 2 weeks ago on Thursday night in MetLife against the Eagles. This game was a different story, and there's a couple things to point out in this game. So the Eagles won 38-20, and I'm going to preface this there's a couple things that are true about this game. One, the Eagles definitely deserve to win this game. They completely outplayed the New York Giants on both sides of the ball. Two, the referees were, again, some of the worst I've seen in football in a good while. And there was definitely a lot of calls that really favored the Eagles. We had another tush-push controversy where it was a 4th and 1. It was not a goal line situation. It was just a 4th and 1. And the tush-push happens. Jalen Hurts reaches the ball over for the first down while he's on top of the pile. And Kayvon Thibodeau knocks the ball out of his hands and recovers it from what it seems to be a fumble. It gets reviewed and it gets determined by the refs that they had blown the whistle before the fumble happened, ruling forward progress, which when looking back at all the replays, it was clear that the whistle was after the fumble. So, which should not have negated the recovery by Thibodeau. This was not the case. The Eagles converted the 4th down and eventually scored a touchdown on that drive, I believe. I'm assuming they did because they scored a lot of touchdowns this game. But it's just another one where it's like the tush push was supposedly the ban for the tush push was originally player safety, and that did not go through. Now it's looking like it probably will be because the concern is now no one's able to officiate it properly. And when it's like in situations like this where it's clear that the officials are just blatantly wrong and not even trying to adjust it or try and, adjust themselves, it's just it makes everything worse because you get frustrated with the Eagles running the tush push. You get frustrated with the tush push itself. And then you get frustrated with the refs being just terrible at their jobs. And I don't mean to sound like a ref basher 100%. I'm sure if I suited up, in referee uniform, I'd do a terrible job as well. But these are referees that are on the highest level of football. They clearly have trained for this type of job, and when time and time again, in this season especially, it's like blatantly obvious that they're missing calls and just calling things incorrectly. It's just really frustrating to watch because it really takes away from an incredibly fun game. And I hope that Roger Goodell and the NFL finds a way to hold their referees to a higher standard, because right now it's just kind of pathetic to watch. Um, as for the rest of this game, this is kind of what I expected the Thursday night game to go, or really just how the Giants and Eagles matchups this year were supposed to go almost. Saquon Barkley finally broke out and had a good game. He had his first run of over 20 yards this season on a 65, I think, yard touchdown run. Um, yeah, Saquon had finished with 115 yards, or not 115, 150 yards and a touchdown on the day. Jalen Hurts had a good game. I think he went 15 of 20 for like 200 yards and 4 touchdowns or something like that, or maybe 3 touchdowns. It was one where like his yardage wise and like volume wise wasn't huge, but he was being very efficient with the ball. I will again say that this is the Giants, and their secondary is pretty bad, and I think they're dealing with secondary injuries in this game. So I do think this is more what we expect to see of the Eagles, not the offensive ineptitude that we saw early in the season. But I would wait a little bit before saying that the Eagles are definitively back, because they've like their last 2 games, while they've been wins, have been against the Carson Wentz led Eagles and the Giants. So it's not exactly the most riveting of competition, I should say. Eagles are still, obviously, they've handled business pretty easily in this game, and last game as well, but it's still, give it a little bit of time and, have them play tougher competition before we can really say like they're going to be the top, like number 1 in the power rankings, you could say. They are 6-2 though, so I would still say they're a very good team and pretty much a lock for the playoffs at this point, unless something goes terribly wrong for them. One last thing to note for this, for the Giants, Cam Scadaboo got injured in this game. Really horrific ankle injury where he got tackled on basically a hip drop tackle where Zach Bond basically tackled him from behind and dragged him down. And it basically bent Cam Scadaboo's ankle at like a completely wrong direction. And so he is out for the season, unfortunately. And just really hope he gets better, because that was a really nasty injury. Also, Saquon Barkley did tweak his groin in this game, like injured his groin, but it's not super serious. I'm not even sure if he's going to miss a game, but just keep an eye out for that. So the last of the 1:00 games is the Browns going into New England to take on the Patriots, and I will recap that after I take another sip of water here real quick. And so this is one where the result was kind of expected at this point in the season. The New England Patriots won 32-13 in one where after the first quarter, where it looked like the Browns might have had a fighting chance, they just completely fell apart. Especially offensively, they could really get nothing, and the Patriots completely pulled away. Drake May had another very good game, 282 yards and 3 touchdowns on 24 attempts, 18 completions. The Patriots finally let Travion Henderson run the ball, which, again, why they hadn't really done this beforehand. He only had 10 carries, but he did go for 75 yards. So who knows, maybe they might let him carry for 11 times next game. We'll see. But yeah, this is one where the Patriots just the whole time were just completely dominating the Browns. It was not very close in the slightest. Dylan Gabriel, I think his experiment might be over, at least for the time being, because he's not looked good at all. It's the Browns still don't really have an answer at quarterback. I'm not sure if Shadur Sanders is going to do much better in this situation at the moment, because the Browns just seem to have a real lack of talent on a good number of positions. and they're good rookies that they've had. Quinshon Judkins, he got injured in this game. Again, I don't think it's super long term, but he did get injured in this game. And then Carson Schwessinger, who was their young up and coming star-ish, I'd say star linebacker that they drafted in the second round. He got injured, which does not help at all. And then I know Mason Graham, their fifth overall pick, he's had a pretty rough start, especially last few games has had not the best go of it. So really the only thing that went well for the Browns this game was Myles Garrett having 5 sacks. Um, and yeah, it's kind of been the Browns over the past couple of years where it's Myles Garrett having 5 sacks in the game where they lose 32-13. That's kind of sums up the Cleveland Browns over the past 3 to 4 years, I'd say. Really, ever since they let Baker Mayfield go, it's the Browns are 2-6, and I doubt they win too many more games so far in this season. I don't know why I said so far there. That makes no grammatical sense, but yeah, I don't think we'll see the Browns winning all that many more games this season. They just, unless some gets turned around, it like completely unforeseen. Like if I don't know, Shadur Sanders does come in and completely lights the world on fire, then they might start winning games. But right now, they just have a complete lack of talent on the offensive side of the ball, or just like lack of a presence on the offensive side of the ball, and their defense just can't just can't pick up the slack that much. And yeah, so that's it for the Browns. For the Patriots, they're 6-2, and Drake May looks really good. Yeah, I think that's I don't want to necessarily say the evil empire is back, but it's getting close. I still want to see Patriots play a few more like really high level teams. Like I want to see how this Patriots team plays against the Chiefs or the Lions, or the Colts. Just to see how they match up competition wise. But right now, they're looking like one of the better, if not the best teams in the NFL. So moving on to the lone 405 game, not the 425 games. There are 2 of those, but the lone 405 game was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going to New Orleans to take on the Saints. And what always feels like a really odd time when the Bucs go into New Orleans. It just seems like no one's ever really able to play clean ball. And this is one where, even more so than a lot of times before it was a really sloppy game. Baker Mayfield only had 152 total passing yards this game. The Buccaneers couldn't do much rushing wise. They did win 23-3. And this is one where this is a defensive battle. The Saints defense actually wasn't playing really that bad. They were really stuffing the Buccaneers early on. There was 2 different series where the Buccaneers got it to literally the 1-yard line. Like they're 1 yard and they would score a touchdown. And it took them, their first series, they went 4 and out. They went 4 straight tries and could not get it and turn it over on downs. And then the second time around, they got to 4th down and did score the touchdown on 4th down, but it took them to 4th down, or until 4th down to actually score a touchdown from the 1 yard. So it took them 8 tries from the 1 yard line to score 1 touchdown, which is not great, to say the least. But it was one where in the end they did win, and they're without Mike Evans, and Chris Godwin's still rehabbing his injury, so they're down a little bit. I think Emeka Ibuka was back in this game, but he didn't have a very good game. So it was definitely one where they used what they had at their disposal, and they got the win where they could. Their defense, especially for the Buccaneers, was incredible this game. I find it sadly funny that after I praised Spencer Rattler a few weeks ago for being decent enough where he's like at least making the Saints a little competitive and like playing clean good football, he proceeds to go on a stretch of like 2.5 games where he turns the ball over like 10 times and scores like 2 touchdowns. It was the Spencer Rattler and really the Saints team that I think everyone was expecting coming into the season. And so Spencer Rattler was benched at, I believe at halftime. Either that or like kind of at some point later on in this game, he was benched for Tyler Shuck. Shuck threw an interception, though it was more on Chris Olave rather than Tyler Shuck. And yeah, it was just all around bad for the Saints. I mean, they're 1-7, and yeah, it was just bad. They are turning now to Tyler Shuck for as a starter going forward. So I think unless he really stinks it up or gets injured, I think they're just gonna keep rolling with him through the rest of the season. I have no idea if he's going to be good or not. But I'm sure Saints fans are hoping for him to be good. But his opening performance was, left a lot to be desired. But we'll see how it goes. There's still, a little over half the season left to go. So I don't know. We'll see. But in the end, it's Tyler Shuck now at quarterback for the Saints. So next up, the Tennessee Titans going into Indianapolis to take on the Colts. The Colts were 6-1 heading in this game. Titans were 1-6. So polar opposites. And, this is a game where the 6-1 team won definitively against the 1-6 team. The Colts won 38-14 in a game that was just never close. Jonathan Taylor had another multi-touchdown performance. He had 2 rushing touchdowns and a receiving touchdown, ran for 153 yards. And also had another good, I don't know the specific amount of receiving yards he had, but he had a lot. He had another insanely good game, both on the field and in fantasy. So I'm very happy that I drafted Jonathan Taylor for fantasy. And he's quickly running his way into the MVP category because, again, while Daniel Jones has certainly been good, this offense really flows through Jonathan Taylor. If he goes down, this Colts team is in big trouble because his production that he's had this season has been just absurd. He's scored 3 touchdowns over the past 3 or 4 games, and it's just he's just a point scoring machine essentially. And on an offense that already has a lot of pretty good players on it. Tyler Warren's looking like an absolute, I wouldn't say steal because he was the 14th overall pick or something like that, but he's looking like a slam dunk kind of pick for the Colts. And I mean, it still feels weird saying that the Daniel Jones led Colts in 2025 are legit, but they are 7-1, literally leading football in terms of record, and an offense that is historically good. It's hard to deny that this team is legit. And they have their 1 losses against the Rams in a game that they were very much in contention for. So I don't know how this is going to translate to the playoffs because I think the Colts are basically a guarantee lock for the playoffs at this point. But for right now, this is if you're a Colts fan, you're in heaven. This is the best case scenario. This is literally the best case scenario. So yeah, this is for the Colts. This is, I don't know what much more I can say than it's so incredibly good. For the Titans, I mean, the season's already a wash. You fired your head coach, and you're just I feel like you're just trying to look and see what Cam Ward has. And this definitely wasn't his best game. And the Titans are, probably looking at top 3 picks for the mock draft because they're going to be picking in probably one of those 3. Almost a good chance they might be picking number 1 overall. I think it's them and the Jets and maybe the Browns are your top 3 picks in the 2026 draft. So the final 425 game was the Dallas Cowboys going into Denver to take on the Broncos. The Broncos were wearing their throwback unis in this game. They looked really good. I kind of wish every team, went with a throwback uni. I think most of them do, but you got to get everyone because a lot of them look really good. And this is one where the Broncos team played as good as they looked. This was easily the best game the Broncos have played all season. They won 44-24 in a game that was not very close. Bo Nix had his best game by a good margin this season, threw for 247 yards and 4 touchdowns. The Broncos run game also really got going. J.K. Dobbins had 111 yards. R.J. Harvey finally had a breakout game where he had 2 touchdowns, 1 on the ground, 1 through the air. And it was one where again, it's the Cowboys defense, and outside of last week against the Commanders, where they're playing against an injury-riddled team missing their top three wide receivers, um, it's a defense that has been incredibly bad, like one of the worst in the league, and it just kind of showed again where they got no pressure on Bo Nix whatsoever. I don't think they got a single sack. I think they had one QB like hurry or like one QB hit the whole game, no sacks, and yeah, it was just that like with literally no pass rush and a secondary that was missing Trayvon Diggs and I think a couple other depth pieces as well. They were just getting picked apart the whole time. And yeah, this is one-sided domination. And for as much as I've ragged on Sean Payton and the Broncos offense for really not performing up to standards this season, this is them performing up to standards. Like this is the Broncos offense that I think people like. This is getting towards their peak of what they can be, where they like both through the ground and through the air, they look very solid and running through or like capitalizing off of a very good offensive line. They can really just hammer down opponents through multiple facets of the ball, along with a good defense that is unfortunately now looking like to miss Pat Surtain for a game or two. He went down with an injury, I think like a foot injury or something like that in the first quarter, came back, then suffered, I think, a shoulder injury after that in the third quarter. So he went out for the rest of the game after that. They did not put him on injured reserve, which is a good sign. So it's looking like my guess is he's probably going to miss next week or this coming week, I should say, just almost like precaution at this point, just so they don't try and rush him back. But it doesn't look like he's going to be missing an extended period of time. But yeah, this is Broncos are 6-2, and this is a really good win for them. As for the Cowboys, they're 3-4-1, and yeah, these are the games where you kind of unfortunately expect from this Cowboys team, where their defense is just so unbelievably bad that their offense just cannot do much to really make up for it. Like they need to score 45 points a game to, win. And that's just not sustainable. And in a game where after, the first like drive, essentially, the Cowboys offense was really struggling. It was rough, to say the least. And this is definitely not Dak's best game in the world. And yeah, this is one where if you're the Cowboys, you're just kind of have to flush this down the toilet and hope that the offense can bounce back and that the defense can do something. Because right now, outside of the Washington game, where they were, again, more fortunate to play against Chris Moore and Robbie Chosen as the top two wide receivers, yeah, they can't play those guys every week, essentially. So we'll move on to the Sunday night game after I take another sip of water here real quick. And so the Sunday night game was the much anticipated matchup between the Packers and Steelers in Pittsburgh. Much anticipated, as this is Aaron Rodgers' first time playing against the Packers in his career. Rodgers, obviously, he had been a Green Bay Packer for basically 2 decades. And had led them to a Super Bowl and was one of the most prolific quarterbacks in team history. And he was going up agained the guy they drafted to replace him, and Jordan Love, and there's all the storylines there. And this was a kind of an odd game where Pittsburgh was a pretty ugly, like not necessarily boring, but like not a high scoring game to start. The first half was ended with a 16-7 lead for the Steelers going in halftime. And the Green Bay offense was just really struggling to get things going in that first half, while the Steelers they weren't playing amazing, but they were playing fine enough. Their defense was holding strong and their offense was doing enough to succeed. And then the second half rolled around, and the Packers decided we should probably throw it to Tucker Kraft a bunch, and they did. And Tucker Kraft had 7 catches for 143 yards and 2 touchdowns. most of that coming in the second half. He had an insane game and was just completely demolishing the Pittsburgh defense by the time the second half rolled around, and it really opened up the rest of the offense for Green Bay. The rushing attack was definitely struggling to get going. That was the one thing that Pittsburgh did defend well, but they were really struggling with defending Jordan Love in the second half. There was actually a stretch in the second half where Jordan Love threw 20 straight completions, which is a new franchise record for the Green Bay Packers. And yeah, that kind of sums it up for Green Bay. It took a while for them to get going, but once they did, they were just unstoppable. And the second half as a whole, their offense went on a roll and their defense really clamped down on Pittsburgh. The Steelers offense had something like 47 yards total in the second half. So it was just completely one-sided half in the second half of that game. And it was why Green Bay won. They just completely dominated quarters 3 and 4, and the Pittsburgh Steelers could do basically nothing. So that was kind of like, that second half is what I feel like a lot of people were expecting Green Bay to play after those first couple weeks, where they they dominated Detroit and Washington with a really, really strong defense. So if Green Bay can string together a full game like that, they can be really, really good. It's just like over the past couple weeks, again, they're 5-1-1, so it's not like they've been playing bad football at all. But they played, like, they almost lost to the Cardinals last week, so it's like they need to play a little bit more consistent to, like, at least make me happy. And I think a lot of other fans and observers of how the Packers are playing, they just need to be a little bit more consistent to, I think make a lot of people more confident in their ability to make a deep playoff run. But again, as of right now, they looked good and got a big win. Aaron Rodgers has not beaten every team in NFL now, as he's only missing beating the Packers, and this was probably his one chance to do it, and it was he unfortunately did not do it, so he does not go in the record books there. But it was one where really just as a whole, this was a game that Green Bay just kind of outplayed the Steelers for the full, like, from start to finish, or like over the course of the whole 60 minutes. The Green Bay Packers outplayed the Steelers. The Steelers defense had a really rough time, especially in the second half, and that's always very worrisome for Steelers fans because this is, by cap numbers, the most expensive defense in football, and they did not put up a good performance, at least in the second half. And I mean, they got a little lucky with Green Bay only scoring 7 in the first half because Brandon McManus, the Green Bay kicker, did also miss 2 field goals. So it could have been worse, essentially. Also, one last thing to know about that game is that the Steelers had on their sort of throwback alternate uniform that looked absolutely terrible. It was like all yellow with like beige pants and then like yellow like arrow, like I don't even know what the design was. Did not look good. Like you can look it up, but it was just the very odd looking Steelers alternate uniforms. So I'll take one more sip of water before I get into the Monday night game because I don't want to talk about this one either. So is the Washington Commanders going into Arrowhead to take on the Chiefs. And this is one where I think myself and I think most Washington fans were not expecting much out of, because this is one with where Jaden Daniels was not starting due to his hamstring injury that he suffered last week in Dallas on an illegal hip drop tackle, I should say. And so it's another Marcus Mariota start, which unfortunately has started 3 games this season. I like Marcus, but I want him to be a backup, not a starter. And so I really hope Jaden Daniels does not have another injury in the rest of the season, because like if he does, the season's kind of getting to be a wash, because Commanders lose this game. They're now 3-5. And this is one where it was a really ugly game to start. Teams were trading turnovers. The Commanders got the ball to start, and they actually came out pretty strong on offense, which I was happy to see how this team came out in the first half, like how aggressive and how decently coached they seemed to come out in the first half. Commanders in their first drive, they were marching down the field pretty reliably. And then they go set up for a screen pass, which why the Commanders threw so many screen passes in this game against like one of the best teams at defending screen passes, I don't know, but I don't know what goes through the mind of Cliff Kingsbury. But in that particular screen pass, it was to Deebo Samuel, and Deebo looked like he just took the eyes off of the ball. It went through his hands, hit his helmet, and popped straight up into the arms of a Chiefs defender for an interception. Though not too long later, Mahomes would throw an interception to Marshawn Lattimore on a really good play. Commanders will then go down again and fail on a fourth down conversion that on a terrible spot from the referee where it was a pass to Zach Ertz basically at the sticks, and Zach Ertz lunged for the first down in the middle of the field, and it looked pretty much like he got it, but the ref spotted him like 2 feet behind the line of scrimmage, and then they bring in their digital measurements, not visual measurements, digital measurements, the thing that they replaced the chain gain with, and it obviously measures the ball short because the referees spot the ball short, and it sparked the reasonable takes of that the visual measurement means nothing if it's the actual spotting itself from human referees that are just completely wrong, because it was spotted by someone who was standing basically at the line of scrimmage when the play happened. Like there was not a referee on the line to spot it. It was just terrible, like absolutely terrible. And it was just one where just more terrible refereeing, and it really took the wind out of the Commanders' sails because they turned the ball over on downs, but then get another pick off of Pat Mahomes where Kelsey basically drops a pass, kind of similar to the Deebo interception to start, where it basically just went through his hands and then got intercepted. That one by Bobby Wagner, and then the Commanders march down again, try and score again, and then they have a 4th and 1, and just a baffling play call there where it was called for like a pass to Terry McLaurin like 30 yards down. It was bad. So the Commanders had plenty of opportunities early to really take the lead and run with it, but they just didn't. I think partly due to coaching, partly due to poor refereeing, and then partly due to just lack of talent with how many injuries they have and just lack of execution on their side. Either way, though, it was only 7-7 at halftime, so it was like the Commanders still had a chance. Terry McLaurin had the lone touchdown for Washington. He was back in this game and had an insanely good touchdown catch, then another insanely good catch later on in the second half, both of which were initially called incomplete, which, it's just another thing where the referees are just completely missing the plays. Luckily, both of them were overturned, but unfortunately, also Terry McLaurin did seem to re-aggravate his quad injury. And this is also one where a game for the Commanders, a lot of their players started dropping like flies. Javon Kinlaw went down with injury. Laramie Tunsil went down with injury. Terry McLaurin, obviously, compounds with injuries last week of Dorrance Armstrong, who was their best pass rusher, who is now out for the season, and also Jaden Daniels. And it was just like, just all of their good players for the Commanders are going down with injury, and it's one of the big reasons why this team is 3-5. They just have not been able to have, especially on the offensive side of the ball, they've not been able to have their A-team offense all in the field at one time. Like the Jaden, Terry, Deebo combination has only been around for like one and a half games maybe, or even not even 1.5 games. They were only around for the I think the first 2 games, and but it was so long ago, it's like it's whatever. And then they lose Austin Eckler in week 2, and it's just like they're like all of the guys you expect to perform have just not been able to be on the field enough to perform well. And then on the defensive side of the ball for Washington, they started out okay. They actually, they started out aggressive. They had a lot of personnel shifts in this game compared to the last couple of weeks, which I liked. And I know a lot of other people in the Commanders fandom liked, like, in that they were, especially in the linebacker section, like they moved Frankie Louvu to basically an edge rusher, Jordan McGee, and a little bit of Kane Madrano, and also what's his name? Tyler Owens. That's his name. They got a lot more starts at linebacker, or just a lot more reps at linebacker. So we see less Bobby Wagner overall. And I like Bobby Wagner, but he's also pretty old and not a pretty big liability in coverage just because he's not nearly as spry as he used to be in terms of athleticism. Um, and so it's just, it was nice to see at least some new looks on the defensive side of the ball, but then they kind of got beat a couple times in man coverage due to some miscommunications on the defensive side. And then they decided to, well, Joe Wett, the defensive coordinator, put them in zone coverage in the second half, and that just got completely picked apart the whole time. It was a very poor decision. And the Chiefs, who won, I might have said it already, but they won 28-7. They just completely dominated the second half. Panthers could do basically nothing in the second half on both sides of the ball, and the game finished pretty much as expected. It was definitely not the Chiefs' best game, but it's when you can win ugly, it's good. And they've been on a roll ever since starting out 0-2. And again, I would wait to say the Chiefs are like back because playing a Commanders team that is down so many key players, including Jaden Daniels, it's not the most impressive feat in the world. But it's still a feat nonetheless, and they're 5-3, so they're clearly looking at LA and Denver to try and overtake to get back in the division winning column, or like leading the division column, I should say. Um, and then just final thoughts about the Commanders, because as they're my team, I'll give my extended thoughts on them. Seems like there's a pretty good shot that Jaden Daniels is going to be back this week for the Sunday night game against Seattle. Not sure. I think probably see Terry McLaurin again because it didn't seem like his quad injury was super serious. Not sure about Javon Kinlaw. But it's one where, like, if Jaden Daniels does not play, the season's definitely getting into wash territory because they're 3-5. Their next two games are against Seattle and Detroit, who are both playing really well this season. Both teams also on the bye this week, and they drop both of those, which there's a pretty decent possibility that they do. They're 3-7, and it's I don't see them coming back from 3-7 to make the playoff. Like, I definitely don't see them winning the division by that point. I don't think they're going to win the division now, where they're at right now, just with how, in terms of Philly's record and then Commanders' record, I don't think they're winning the division. And if they drop to 3-7, I'm not sure if they can make it into a wild card spot. So I don't know. They really need Jaden Daniels back to at least make this season have a chance, because if not, it's going to be rough. And we'll probably see them sell. I would assume probably Duron Payne at the deadline if they do wind up selling pieces, because Commanders had traded away their second and fourth round picks in this upcoming draft for, I think, Lattimore, and then also maybe Lattimore, I'm not quite sure, but I know definitely Laramie Tunsil. And yeah, basically the gist of it is that Commanders, if they're able to string off some wins here with Jaden Daniels coming back, then I doubt they sell. But if they do lose the next two, I think they do sell the deadline, and I could see Duron Payne going, because I've been saying he's in a contract year. He might not actually be in a contract year, but I think he is. It's either he has 1 or 2 years left on his extension deal. But he's having a good season, so it's one where he's not exactly young anymore. He was drafted in 2017, I think, and he's probably someone you could trade away, because he's one of the few players I think on this team that could fetch a decent amount of value. So I don't know. I hope they don't trade him away, because I like Duron Payne, but I don't know. We'll see. It is very dependent on how these next few weeks go. So that's it for week 8. Again, kind of pretty interesting week. Not too many close games, and it was one where, as a Commanders fan, I'd rather forget about it. Not sure if I'm going to do an episode this weekend, mostly because I just don't know what I would want to do. Like I definitely have the time for it this weekend. I'm just not sure what the topic would be, because Like I have plenty of ideas, but I don't know like what I could do into like a condensed an hour 15-minute podcast episode. But we'll see. I'll hopefully be able to think of something by then. If I don't, for whatever reason, obviously next Tuesday will be the week 9 recap for the NFL. I might also try and work on my YouTube channel that I haven't started yet, but it's something that I've had in my mind for a while of what I want to do. So potentially something that could happen. We'll see. Either way, that's that for this week, and thank you very much for listening.